Moments of inspiration mixed with time to network, IBJ Media Events has you covered. From industry deep dives to awards celebrating Indiana's top leaders, see what's coming up and reserve your seat at ibj.com/RSVP.
Welcome to the Indiana Lawyer Podcast. I'm your host, Maura Johnson, and in today's episode, I'm joined by attorney John Maley with Barnes Thornburg. Maley was recently named chair of the firm's Labor and Employment Department and also recently became president of the Indiana State Bar Association, where he leads the organization's efforts in supporting Hoosier attorneys in their professional careers. In this episode, Maley and I talk about his work at Barnes Thornburg and with the Bar Association, including what goals he has for the year ahead and how federal and state level changes impact his work. But before we begin, here's a word from our sponsor, Taft.
Taft, today's modern law firm. At Taft, we cultivate a highly respectful, transparent workplace that fosters creativity, teamwork, inclusion, and diversity. We couple our culture with a client-first approach, rewarding lawyers who understand their clients' goals and work to deliver success. Taft, the modern law firm. To learn more, visit taftlaw.com.
Mr. Maley, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
So just to start out, I know that it's probably obvious, but would you mind explaining to me a breakdown of what the focus is of Barnes Thornburg's Labor and Employment Department?
Certainly, and it does vary by firms, so it's a good question. At Barnes Thornburg, labor and employment has been part and parcel of our practice for decades and decades and decades. It's been a historical strength. When I came to the firm in 1990, it was a strong practice area, and that's continued to grow with labor and employment laws expanding federally, states, and locally across the country. We're a group in labor and employment in Barnes Thornburg that does everything labor and employment related. So, and we represent employers exclusively. Some firms represent only employees, some do a mix, but we're a management side, ownership, employer side focus, as it needs to be. And for us, just with conflicts, can't be on both sides of a legal issue, for instance. We're about 100 professionals across the country through our multiple offices. And for us, labor employment includes traditional labor, collective bargaining, arbitrations, unionized employers or employers that are confronting organized labor. And then employment litigation of all types. Some law firms have employment litigation done by a litigation group. We do all our own employment work from cradle to grave, including trials and appeals. Non-compete trade secret work, both guidance and litigation. Everyday employment counseling, from acquisitions of companies where we're involved in the due diligence to everyday counseling on hire, fire, wage and hour. Then benefits work, immigration, OSHA, so workers' compensation, everything that companies, whether they're 5 employees or 55,000, have these kinds of issues. And we're privileged to represent small privately held companies up to large publicly traded groups.
And on that kind of scale of employers and the size of their companies, would you say that you tend to represent companies that have larger employee counts?
It really runs the gamut, and my practice is not unlike any of my colleagues, where I represent a number of small family-owned companies that have been around, some of them for several generations, and represent both universities, higher education, some governmental entities, towns and cities, and then mid-sized companies with, I'd call that, 100 to 500 employees, and then large publicly traded companies or private companies that have tens of thousands of employees. So we really run the gamut, and they all are very interesting and enjoyable to work with. And with that sort of diversity of size and type of industry and ownership, or take government or universities, interesting because sometimes my client contact is the company owner. Just finished a call with the company owner, all right, of a 25 employee operation that I've represented for decades. Others, I'm working with a human resources director or an employment counsel or litigation counsel or general counsel. So it ranges the gamut, which is interesting as we have this great variety of the people that we interface with, which is fun.
I know that you were just recently named chair of the department. Can you tell me more about your experience in this area of law and how it's informing your leadership in the department?
Yeah, certainly. So we're organized by departments. So and these would all, you could guess at most of these, litigation, corporate, labor and employment, healthcare, environmental, etc. And at the department level, we manage, I'll call the care and feeding of the team. So the department leadership, of which I'm chair, and then there are other leaders involved functionally and geographically. Our job is to make sure we've got good talent and enough talent to fill the needs that our clients have, to plan not just this year, but on a longer term basis for what the team's needs are, and then the training, support, and guidance to the team. So that's really the role of the department leadership, as well as literally the budget side of it. So we have various budgets for whether it's meetings or client relations, etc. So there's the administrative side of it as well. And in terms of my practice, after I clerked in federal court from 1980 to 1988 to 1990, and was exposed to labor and employment work. When I came to the firm and was doing general litigation work, then all of a sudden federal laws really expanded employment law. We had this 1991 Civil Rights Act, which gave jury rights and compensatory and punitive damages in employment cases, federal cases. The ADA and the FMLA were passed within several years. And so all of a sudden, the volume of employment litigation expanded dramatically. And as a federal court litigator, trial lawyer, I was drawn to that and found these kinds of cases very interesting because they're people based, and the law is changing and growing. But these cases have a higher propensity to end up being tried than lots of other types of cases. And as a trial lawyer, that's appealing to me.
So within your personal practice, is there any one legal case that you participated in that you've really relied on so far to guide your own practice and leadership approach in the department?
It's an interesting question. So there's one case that really started me on this path and passion, and it was probably in 91 or 92. It was one of my early original clients that came to me on my own, and was a non-compete trade secret case that was very intense, very fast moving, and very significant. It was what we call a bet the company case, and prosecuted that successfully, had a great result for the client that the client says saved the company. And from that, I adopted this, I'll call a mindset of that's how I need to treat every case. Like it's my only client, my only case, and figure out how to drive that case to a successful resolution. And that varies in every case. Sometimes the client wants to resolve the case quickly, inexpensively, and other times it's a at the company type of case. So that has always instilled that mindset in me through the years in employment litigation. And then in terms of leadership, the one of the nice things about this practice area is there are so many different types of matters that labor and employment lawyers encounter. And as you progress as a lawyer, you lead those matters. And I've been doing that since the early mid 1990s. And so you're working, and particularly for us, where we're working nationally, and my practice is national. I'm working with lawyers, paralegals, staff all across the country, and it takes practice and learning both from others and from reading and and go into programs to learn how best or better to lead a team. And that then, along with many other experiences, such as, bar service leadership and other firm leadership positions I've had and nonprofit leadership positions I've had, I think helped me to be confident stepping into this significant role in leading this group of 100 professionals and making sure we're doing best to support them, their lives, their practices.
Yeah. What do you see right now as maybe the biggest challenges facing the labor and employment law right now? And how do you plan to navigate leading the department through those challenges?
Yeah. So in the law space itself, it's a continued increase escalation of the number of laws that regulate employers, and it is federal, state, and it has really increased at the local level to where 35 years ago, when I started practicing with the firm, you were thinking of state and some federal. Now the federal landscape has increased dramatically. States are increasing with all types of regulation, and then even cities and towns and counties. And so when you're analyzing, let's take an example of, okay, can our employer have a non-compete that has certain limitations for former employees when they depart from the company? That now is multifaceted, where there are some jurisdictions where it's impossible, it's illegal. There's one jurisdiction where it's actually can be a crime to try to do that. And then otherwise across states and municipalities, cities and towns, there are multiple layers to this. So it's a more detailed analysis than it was decades ago, and that just continues to evolve. And it's just one example of one niche within the larger labor and employment area. So staying current is critical, and that's going to continue. The pace of the practice is increased. It's not uncommon that we're called at late in the afternoon on a Friday or before a holiday weekend as is coming up, with a very urgent matter of, can the employer do this, or how do they manage this situation with one or more employees? So it's just in a way more of the same. This has been on a fast track that just gets faster. So it takes nimbleness, constant attention, constant accessibility and availability, and maniacal service to stay at the top.
Yeah. And bouncing off that need to adapt to all these changes, what kind of changes are you maybe seeing to labor and employment policy as a result of a new presidential administration and then a new governor in Indiana?
Sure. Every administration, and I've been around now to see multiple administrations, there are always changes with every new administration, because you think of the agencies that the administration impacts and selects, or has a role in selecting leadership. So the analogy could be, if you think about steering a ship, you turn left and it takes some turns to catch up with where you want to be, turn back to the right. Sometimes it's down the middle. And so this is a constant evolution back and forth. Right now, in the current, at the federal front, we're seeing, for instance, with the EEOC taking not uncommon, but taking a very different track than the prior leadership of the EEOC. And one thing that is particularly notable about that is that we've seen this with universities being a focus of attention. We're seeing even law firms now being a focus of attention. And of course, one of the bigger areas of focus has been examining inclusion, equity, diversity, and similar principles that are being scrutinized by federal, state, and local governments across the country.
And so switching gears a little bit, I do want to talk about the Indiana State Bar Association, because you're now the new president. I just wanted to start off first. How is it going? Especially as you're now juggling both of these kind of new positions with the chair at the department.
Sure. So sure, the juggling's easy, because the practice, one of the things I love about private practice is I learned this from my father, who was a small town trial lawyer practitioner. He was the master of his schedule. So if I was running a cross country or track meet 3 hours away, he was there. And then I would notice as I went to bed at night, he was at the dining room table working on a brief for the next day. And so that's how I lived my life, with family first and my other passions, such as bar service, community service, distance running and coaching, distance running, disability rights and service. I've always fit in with private practice because of the nature of what we do. It allows more flexibility. And I've always wanted to be active and engaged. And so having several different leadership roles hasn't been uncommon during my career. The big difference now in like the 90s, when we had 5 children in 7 years, I've actually got quite a bit more time available than I did earlier in my career. So it's been very enjoyable, both this new position chairing our firm's National Labor Employment Department, where I'm getting to have even more deep connections with my team, the team I've worked with, and getting to know many of them even better to support them. And then likewise at the Indiana State Bar Association has been fantastic. The staff is excellent. The board and the other leadership groups and volunteer groups are really phenomenal. And so I've really enjoyed it. I'm almost through month 1, and I've had multiple opportunities already for really meaningful engagement with a bench and bar, and looking forward to the next 11 months of that.
Yeah. The lawyer attended briefly the annual conference, and it seemed very like attendees were very enthusiastic about the year ahead. Would you say that as well?
Yes, it's, we're very relevant, as the state's largest legal organization, with the number of changes that are occurring and more quickly, and external forces or influences on lawyers and legal profession. I think this is, at least in my career, one of the more significant and relevant times for bar associations and the impact and importance of bar associations, and whether it's the legal shortage that the United Supreme Court and its committee has been working on, the state bar has been working on. That's going to remain front and center for us for the coming years. Whether it's the independence of not just the judiciary, but now we're seeing the independence of lawyers and law firms, where there's been significant attention, scrutiny, sometimes criticism, and sometimes increased governmental focus on lawyers and law firms. So it's an important time for the profession, an important time for we as a state bar association to represent and advocate for our members in the profession.
And when we last spoke, right when you had been announced as president, actually, you had told me that 2 of your biggest goals for your year as president were to serve and advocate for members of the bar and the legal profession in general. How do you feel that you've been able to do this so far?
Yeah. So fortunately, there are a lot of ways that we're able to do that in this role. One of them is as simple as the columns in Res Gestae that the president has the privilege of. Others are, for instance, just in this month, we've had a number of different interactions. I mean, there's the ceremonial side of being at the swearing in for the 300 plus new Indiana lawyers, having the privilege of having a one-on-one session with Chief Justice Rush to talk about the needs of the judiciary and how we can help, and likewise the needs of the State Bar Association and how the third branch can help. We're having a number of meetings as the association regularly does, but with different groups. For instance, we've been meeting with law firm managing partners around the state to get their insights and what's of concern and priority to them and how we can support them and their firms. That constitutes a significant number of attorneys in the state, obviously, and then also we'll be getting around the state geographically to meet with lawyers and judges in cities and towns of different sizes and law firms, from solo small practitioners to governmental agencies. So it's a year-long exercise of being out there and being the ambassador and the advocate And sometimes you don't know when those opportunities or needs are going to arise. So part of that is the planning to be ready for that. So we are presently in our executive committee, we're meeting and studying how can we in the near term have a loud voice, a significant voice, an impactful voice on the issues of, for instance, attorney and law firm independence and judicial independence.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of brings up my next question. Something that, we at the lawyer have noticed from the Bar Association and just around the state this year is really a big focus on just promoting the rule of law. So can you tell me about the Bar Association's role in promoting that and what you hope to accomplish further during your presidency in regards to that?
Certainly, it's always been important, and it may well be that it's more important now than ever. Part of this could simply be the access to information and misinformation and the ease of criticism with, one post, one click, that if someone disagrees with the outcome of a case, everyone is their own publisher, their own editor, and that voice can then be amplified and republicized over and over and over, and oftentimes without the benefit of information about what actually occurred, why that occurred, what the rule of law is. And so it starts with, for instance, and the timing of you and I having this conversation is ideal, because one of the first things I did as state bar president, again, was to be at the swearing in of the new attorneys. And so to listen to Chief Justice Rush and Judge Barker and Judge Brady and others talk about the rule of law to these new admittees, for the State Bar Association to provide the oath of attorneys printed for every admittee, which I still have from when I was sworn in 37 years ago. That's sort of day one of new lawyers being sworn in and focusing in that ceremony and with the oath, the importance of the rule of law. And that's something that continues throughout the year with our different programming and CLEs, and the different conferences that we have. And of course, Law Day will be another day like last year, where it was so special for Judge Barker and State Bar, Indy Bar, Marion County Bar, and others to celebrate with reading the oath at the federal courthouse in Indianapolis. So we're looking for more opportunities to continue to talk about and discuss the rule of law. And if to think of it this way, if we lawyers aren't doing that, then who will? Who will fill that void? So it's very important for us to continue to be actively involved in those roles. And the Indiana Bar Foundation, of course, does that very well with its programming, as do many other local bars through the state of Indiana. And we want to support all of them in their efforts.
Well, and something that going off of the bar admission ceremony, something I always like to hear the couple that I've been to is that idea of having the oath printed out in your office so that you can continually be reminded of the oath you took and the importance of it in your legal profession. So now looking ahead to next year, obviously we're just a few weeks out from 2026. Is there any goals that you have on the cusp that you're looking forward to in the next year in either of your roles?
So collaboration, and interesting, I've at the law firm role of chairing the department, I've got sort of 4 focus. I'll have that role for 3 years, but I've identified 4 focuses beyond, continuing the great work that we've been doing for decades and the growth that we've had. So one is collaboration, and that applies equally, of course, in leading the State Bar Association. It's the number one job, I think, of the president is to collaborate with bench and bar, paralegals, and the various associations. As an example, being as representing the State Bar Association as president of the Indiana State Bar Association, the Marion County Bars Centennial Gala, and the collaboration, just being there and interfacing and having wonderful discussion with so many members as I am of the Marion County Bar. So collaboration, innovation, which in this day and age of just advancing technology, for instance, and with AI being important. That applies in both these roles where clients, some are scared of it, some are embracing it. And as it evolves, there are levels of AI that practitioners are appropriately utilizing, and then areas where it is very dangerous because of you can't write a brief for us and can't cite case law properly, as you've seen. And likewise for the bar association, how can we add artificial intelligence to efficiencies to squeeze out more out of the members' dues dollars? Next is sophistication. And so, taking the labor employment practice, there are, of course, through the years, there have been parts of the practice of law that lawyers used to do that they no longer do. And those are take an everyday residential real estate transaction. It's the rare transaction that a lawyer is drafting that agreement, right? It's been a standardized form in most states and most cities. And there are the days of lawyers individually reviewing 100 banker's boxes of 1 million pages of paper. That's all been automated, and artificial intelligence can help and already has been for years helping with the search of that through search terms and platforms that help. And so that's evolving and will continue to. And then, but the sophistication will still remain for lawyers. Lawyers are, I'm confident, will always be necessary. They have judgment, skill, experience, empathy, sympathy, compassion, all those things that make lawyers unique, and that lifetime of experience that builds year in, year out. And then the mentoring that comes that we've all learned, all of us lawyers have learned from others. So that's going to remain important in the sophistication of the practice, including labor employment, and other areas will be important, and as well for the Bar Association. And then lastly, excellence. And so I think there's the Greeks said that happiness is reaching your full potential along lines of excellence. And that's something that I've tried to live by and think about regularly, it's true when I do my best work and provide my best service, I'm happier, I'm more satisfied. And when the team members are doing excellent work, whether it's bar association staff, volunteers, servant leaders, or the members of our labor employment team at our firm, that makes it all more enjoyable. And it should be. This is a great profession. It's a noble profession. I love every day. I could do sometimes without some of the volume of email. But, that's, again, how do we manage that, and where can AI help with that, and sophistication and how we deal with that. But that's my goal. Ultimately, I've been blessed, as my dad was, to really love this profession. It is such a great way to serve others. And even if it's people who are lawyers who are maybe in service areas that they may not always feel like they're impacting individual lives, pro bono always provides that outlet as well. And that's something that certainly the Bar Association supports and that I support. And in our labor employment department, very active in pro bono. So I think it's a win-win, and I'm really privileged to have both of these unique roles, and they support each other in an interesting way.
Well, thank you so much for joining me and for taking the time to speak with me. I really appreciate
My
your
pleasure.
insight. And I'm really, sorry.
I was just going to say thank you for what you do and for what the Indiana lawyer has done for decades. Been a very, very important voice and forum in Indiana and for Indiana law and lawyers and judges. And my compliments to everyone with the Indiana lawyer and all those like you that serve through it.
Thank you. We appreciate that. That's all I have for you for this episode. Thank you, as always, for listening to the Indiana Lawyer Podcast. For more information on what's happening in the legal community across the state, you can head over to our website at theindianalawyer.com. While you're there, you can also subscribe to our daily and monthly newsletters, check out more podcast episodes, and listen to podcasts from across the IBJ Media Network. You can also find us on social media, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn.
From broadcast to podcast, Inside Indiana Business with Gary Dick is now available anytime on YouTube or in your podcast feed. Subscribe and listen wherever you get your podcast or at ibjpodcast.com.
Do you want to know what really drives change in Indiana? You won't find it in sound bites, you'll find it in stories. Stories from CEOs, lawyers, coaches, entrepreneurs, and community advocates. That's the IBJ Media Podcast Network. Insightful, local, impactful. Find all of our shows by searching IBJ Media in your podcast app or visit ibjpodcast.com.